Hello, I'm Casey Aiken. This is 21 This Week. Coming up next, money, who's got the money? Montgomery County budget has a little bit of a problem, a $120 million problem. Does the GOP tax bill discriminate against high-tax states like, wait for it, Maryland? Will the Kirwan Commission be something other than a repeat of the Thornton Plan? And former 21 This Week panelist John Herson is running for an at-large county council seat. What are we going to do without him? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by business and political strategist Rich Parsons, newly re-elected chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, transportation and railway consultant Phil Bell, and political strategist Susan Heltemes. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Last week, County Executive Isaiah Leggett sent a memo to the County Council, and it went something like this. Dear County Council, we have a little bit of a problem. For the past 2 years, the county has overestimated how much revenue we anticipated collecting. And of course, the members of the County Council spent too much money on pet projects. So we have a deficit of $120 million to make up for. It's your problem, now fix it. Outgoing Council President Roger Berliner said no one anticipated this development. And the incoming council president, Hans Reimer, said that he expects the council to work through this quickly and added that overall the county is in strong shape. Nonetheless, Delegate Bill Frick, who's running for county executive, pointed out that the council continually voted for larger increases in the budget than County Executive Leggett had proposed, so this result was predictable. Susan, 2 years ago, the council raised property taxes 8.7%. and increased the recordation tax, which proved very unpopular. How then will the county address this massive shortfall without more unpopular tax increases going into an election year?
Casey, you're so naive. It's election year. Nobody's going to raise taxes. You cannot get 9 people to vote out of 9 for a tax increase. However, the county executive, in his fashion, immediately sent out a note and said 2% cuts across the board. I've talked to department heads, and they are doing just that. They're holding off new hires, and they will get around this. Revenues are down, which, but the stock market is fine, and, I think they will get through this. And the county does have a rainy day fund, so it's not as dire as what it seems.
What does the stock market have to do with the fact that the revenue is down?
The economy is strong. It has been for a couple of years, but Montgomery County revenues are down a bit. And so the executive is dealing with it. He's doing the grown-up thing. We're going to cut 2%. We're going to start there. We're not going to do new hires. And there will not be a tax increase, though, Casey. As much as you would like to laud that against Democrats next year, there won't be a tax increase.
Look, the council's already mismanaged the budget, so
I think mismanagement is incorrect.
The fact that they don't have a tax increase this year is pretty much irrelevant. Rich, while revenue targets were missed, is it fair to say that it was the increased spending by the council was the major reason the budget's out of whack?
Well, yes, it is fair. Budgets are numbers that express the priorities, and the fact is, I think there was a $219 million increase in the budget in 2017, another $64 million increase in 2018. In each case, the council went at least $20 million above what the county executive requested. So clearly, we have a spending problem here, and budget discipline really requires setting priorities and living within your budget, and the council has failed to do that. I think it's pretty clear cut.
Mark, so how do you mismanage the revenue projections? What could have been done better to make sure that the revenue side was being taken care of?
Actually, that is one of the surprising things about this, and Susan put it on. I mean, the capital gains is driven by the stock market. The stock market is very strong. One wonders what would have happened if the economy weren't as strong as it is now, whether the revenues would be off even more. So I'm surprised because there's really no reason why the forecast shouldn't have been out of whack like that.
Well, but isn't it, I mean, isn't it indicative of the fact that maybe not as many businesses are starting up in Montgomery County, and not as many people are doing business in Montgomery County because of the unfriendly atmosphere that exists?
Absolutely, but the projections are based on real estate, which is relatively stable. It goes up and down, but in 1 year to the next, the changes aren't as dramatic.
But I
And
can't-
income tax.
I
and income
can
tax.
tell you, though, in terms of restaurants and those kind of stores, the county has an all-time market on that. People are coming to this county. They're starting restaurants, small businesses. So that isn't I don't think that's the
But
problem.
now here's an important question.
Quickly,
Are we
because we got to
talking-
go to our next topic.
Are we talking about a cut in the increase in spending, or are we talking about actual cuts?
There is a 2% actual cut the county executive has mandated.
So they will
I
spend less next year
I think
than-
Ike has done, has done a pretty good job in addressing this. Well, I want to go on to our next topic, which is about national taxes. And while most of the national attention has been on the Republican overhaul of the tax code, there was a little threat of a federal government shutdown, but that's been averted for at least another 2 weeks. So we're going to spend our time talking about the tax bill that's percolating in the Congress. Mark, one of the more controversial proposals in the tax plan is the cap on deductions for state and local taxes. Critics argue that this is a mean-spirited provision directed at the blue-leaning states that typically are high-tax states like New York, the District of Columbia, Connecticut, California, and oh, by the way, number 5 on the hit parade, our own free state of Maryland. For those that itemize their deductions, however, Marylanders take an average of $4,200 per taxpayer. Is this a mean-spirited provision?
No, not at all. And actually, the majority of Marylanders don't take the itemized deduction. And for those who take the standard deduction on the bill is doubled. So even with the reduction in rates, the advantage for people who don't take the deduction is that much greater. So yes, I understand the chattering classes have a tendency to focus on the state and local piece without ignoring basically the savings that comes from the other aspects of the bill.
And there's the alternative minimum tax, which means that even with deductions, you still are going to get caught through the alternative minimum tax be
Absolutely,
more
yes.
equalized. Phil, conservatives like yourself and President Reagan argue that 2/3 of Americans don't even itemize. They receive no benefit from state and local taxes, and they're being forced to subsidize high tax policies of a handful of states. What do you think?
Well, let me turn it around and ask it this way. Does the current tax system disadvantage those in low tax states? And why have we not had a debate on that? So a better solution is, why don't we just have these high tax states, like our friends Mike Miller and Mike Bush, go and cut taxes and stop spending so much and stop spending the way the Montgomery County Council was spending. Let's reduce that and get the full benefit for states like Maryland and New York and California and everybody up and down the income scale in all those places. That sounds like a great idea, and not just let Florida and Texas and so forth win.
Yes, but when you look at these states that are on that list, they're states who provide the most benefits for their residents. I
Do
wouldn't
they
want
provide the
to.
most
Yes, they do.
benefits?
I would
How?
not want to live in Texas with their education system. There are a lot of reasons, but this tax plan is so unfair. It protects golf course owners. It protects people who own private jets, but I think that this plan could be in big trouble when they finish a conference committee, because you know what? It has so astutely protected people from Hurricane Maria and before, and that kind of natural disaster, and the fire in October. But you know what? People in California are not going to be able to deduct their losses from their property under this new tax law. There are 9 Republicans in California who are going to have a hard time defending this budget because their citizens are not going to be able to deduct their home. So
Wait a minute,
this,
wait a minute. Are you
second
talking
now.
because of
The fire.
Because of the fires
But
that
Casey-
are going
Yes.
on right
Casey,
now?
let
Wait
me-
a minute,
they-
I want to go to
Let
Rich
me bring
on
it
this.
back to Maryland, because there's really a double whammy that does hit us. The tax provisions you talked about, we can no longer deduct the state and local taxes, which will hit high tax states like Maryland. The other thing that hits us, especially here in Montgomery County, where the average home price is about $475,000, if you do the math on a $400,000 mortgage, we're going to get creamed with the just evisceration of the mortgage deduction tax, the mortgage tax
The cap
deduction.
on
the cap.
mortgage.
If you look at a $400,000 mortgage, it depends on what interest rates you're paying, of course, but you might be writing off $25,000 a year on that deduction alone. And you're gonna get cut to
$400,000
10.
mortgage would not be affected because the cap was at $500,000.
I know, but there's
but
a
no.
limit on how much you can deduct, isn't it?
There's a cap of $10,000 mark on how much you can deduct that will
Yeah.
hit places like Montgomery County really, really hard. This is going to be a disaster
As
for
a
Maryland
person, I
homeowners.
I don't think.
Casey, the
I
other
think
thing
you're
is,
wrong on
No,
this,
that's
Rich.
correct.
no, it is.
Wait a
I'm not
minute,
wrong
wait a
on
minute.
this.
I mean,
It's capped at $10,000.
New mortgages.
It's not new. It doesn't matter if it's
Wait a
new
minute,
or old.
but a new
Your
mortgage
deduction
right
for
now
mortgage
today
interest.
is 4.5%.
You're-
And a 4.5% mortgage on $400,000, you're not going to be paying $25,000 a year.
You're somewhere close. You're 20 to 25,000.
Yeah,
in that range.
because you know what? You can only
Yeah.
do $10,000.
So you're losing half the value
So
of that
I am
deduction.
going to lose on that. And the interesting thing about this tax plan, as best we know, because it's not really known what's in there, but is probably 3 or 4 of us, maybe all of us on this panel, are going to end up ultimately in a year or two, if not this year, paying more taxes because of
Let me
Let
finish.
me
Can I add
ask-
one point
wait.
because I didn't get to
Okay.
complete it? There's one other provision that there's a big pushback that hey we're increasing the standard deduction, so that makes everything okay. Well, not if you're a self-employed business person who's filing a personal tax return like most small business people in this state and around the country. None of us use the standard deduction. We all itemize. If you're
Yep.
if you're self-employed and running your own business, you are using itemized deductions. So the fact that those itemized deductions are going away and they're saying, oh, we're doubling the standard deduction, that doesn't make up for the loss of the write-offs that we're getting now. So I think a lot of small business owners are going to get hit right
the
between
trade-off-
the
what the-
I want Mark to wrap it up. Gotta
But
get a
the
break.
the trade-off is the reduction in the top tax rate for the sub S, the small
Correct.
business tax increase.
Yeah, but
so in other words, you can always there's
But
some
what about
things
sole
that pay for,
proprietors and the
but
people who are filing personal
Yep.
returns with Schedule
They're
C?
gonna
They can
They're not
register
covered. They're
as
not
a
sub
subject
S.
arrest. That's not very
But
difficult.
most of them aren't.
Less than $200
And that's
to do.
why most middle
Most of
class
them aren't.
people are ultimately in a year or two going to be paying more taxes, and they can't deny that.
Especially here.
You know what?
Yep.
We're going to find out in a year or two because they haven't even passed the darn thing out of either house. When we come back from this break, will the Kirwan Commission end up being a rehash of the Thornton plan? And another 21 This Week panelist is running for office. Who is going to be left to keep Susan and me company on the set? Stay tuned. And welcome back. The Joint Education Committee, appointed by Governor Larry Hogan and the state's legislative leaders to address the complicated issue of school funding, is chaired by William Kirwan. He issued a preview of its findings this week. And while giving overall praise to the Commission's preliminary report and its focus on the 9 building blocks to achieve excellence in education, the Baltimore Sun criticized the report for not taking into consideration race as part of their recommendations in their plan. Rich, the Kirwan Commission yet has to issue its report, but has indicated a couple of things, such as the need for mandatory pre-K education, and there should be more career programs in high school, not all college tracking. But the response from the Baltimore Sun reminds me of the Thornton plan when it was issued, and it resulted in a budget bloat because of unfunded mandates. Is this a potential problem?
Well, it was a huge problem with the Thornton Commission report, and it ended up being a real budget disaster. I think I am looking forward to reading the report when it comes out, but I do know that focusing on early childhood education, and if you want to mitigate some of the budget impacts, you can focus it first on the Title I schools, where I think it's needed the most, and also the path to vocational education. I think it argues for being a little bit more creative about how we fund that. There's great opportunities for apprenticeship programs, internship programs that bring the private sector into helping find placements for a big percentage of our kids, graduating each year don't have to go to college. There are great career paths if they have better vocational and career training opportunities. And we don't do a good enough job, I think, here in this county or around the state of
Or the
partnering
nation.
with nonprofits, with private sector companies to provide those apprenticeship and internship programs and using our great community college system. There's all kinds of ways we can be creative. So I look forward to seeing the report. I think we can avoid the budget mistakes of the past if we just think smartly about how we fund this and maybe target it to where the need is instead of doing overall mandates.
Mark, Susan just mentioned the fact that the nation at large isn't doing enough, and that was picked up by Ken Langone, one of the founders of Home Depot, who said on CNBC's Squawk Box the other day that Congress and the White House must address the issue of income inequality gap. And the only way to do that is to provide better education for our children so they can be productively hired. He went on to say that the United States cannot continue to produce high school graduates that are functionally illiterate in English and math. But if he is correct, how do you solve the problem? Is it a money problem, as suggested by the Baltimore Sun, or is it a leadership problem?
Well, in Baltimore City, the public schools are essentially tied for first place in the spending per pupil. And yet, about a month ago, a report came out that 1/3, 13 out of the 39 public high schools in Baltimore, had no students proficient in math. Now, whether you're doing vocational or getting ready for college, certainly that
math.
kind of record, you got to have math. There's a fundamental problem in the way the schools are operated that money alone isn't going to solve.
But
One
isn't
of
there a
the-
fundamental problem getting the message to our young people that they need to value their education?
Absolutely.
And that it is not irrelevant to their future?
One of the things that I think we can do, that countries that are really great at educating their kids are longer school years. And that's something we've stayed away from. And I think that one of the things we can do is have a longer school year. And
Pushing
it is
back into June
Yes.
specifically.
And the
Yes.
other thing is
Starting earlier.
that when you are talking about people poor kids in Baltimore, they are lucky to get food. They may have
This
no
is
parents
a
around.
terrible.
I'm going
This
to
is a
switch to
terrible
Phil.
way.
Phil, wrap it up.
When you go down this road, having kids in school as long as they do is problematic. They don't have the opportunity to educate themselves, learn how to work in an office, learn how to socialize, any of these important things that are required to be a successful human being. We need shorter school years, and as Casey said, we need for the kids to say, you know what, it's up to me to get educated
The best
and go from there.
schools in the world have a longer school
You know
year
what?
than the United
No,
States.
that is the United
Susan,
States is still the world leader. There is
No.
more
It is
education.
It is a
not.
leadership.
Not an
It is a
educational
leadership
attainment.
problem. Our political leaders
with
are
Casey.
not getting the
Leadership.
message through to our young people that they need an education. It's a societal problem.
It is. It's not a political
It's not a money problem. It's not how many days you spend in school. You got to have a desire to be educated. We've got to go on to our next topic. John Herson, former House Majority Leader and longtime contributor on 21 this week, announced that he's running in the very crowded field for an at-large county council seat. Susan, get this. There are over 30 candidates who are racing in the Democratic primary for 4 council seats. How will Herson break himself out of the pack?
Well, first of all, that number is going to go down dramatically because most of these candidates are running with public financing and they're never going to meet the threshold. So I think that's going to knock a lot of the 30 off. The other thing is that John Herson comes in as a grown-up in the room. He has a lot of experience. He was the majority leader in the House. He was the first and only president of the American Council of State Legislators. He has a variety
So he's
of
got a big rep, is that what you're saying?
Well, he has a good resume, but he's also, and this is one of the things that sets John up, he is truly a nice person that is respected and liked, and I think that's going to surge
All
him.
that's very
Well,
nice,
wait, I
but the
wanna-
real thing is he was on 21 this week.
Exactly.
That's
I
the
was
thing.
going to say
You
that's
got
the
that
main
right. You got that
credential.
right.
And I can take credit for bringing him on board.
Mark, unfortunately, we only have 30 seconds to address this. You don't have any Republicans so far who have announced for this seat.
Rob Dyer has not filed. I think he's indicated that he's planning. I was staggered that of the 30 that you think so many of them were motivated for campaign financing.
It's not motivated, but it
but-
opens the possibilities. Look
All right,
at Governor Hogan.
Before we leave, one of the candidates running in the at-large race is the council president, Hans Reimer. Is it possible that he can get defeated?
It's possible, but I think unlikely. He is the president of the council this year, which
Can
gives
only
them
hope.
a little bit of publicity.
Voters are looking for
We can
something
only
new, as
hope.
we saw with the term limits vote.
Yeah.
They're looking for some new faces, and they're
All
going to
right.
get them.
We will see.
We got to
It's possible.
roll on to parting shots when we come back from the short break. And now with parting shots, Susan Heltemes.
As most viewers know, I am a proud native Minnesotan, and this week my friend Al Franken is going to announced he is going to resign from the Senate. That is a great loss, and I wish that there had been an ability to go through the Ethics Committee. But the women of the Democratic caucus in the Senate, 1/3, which are women, made a difference. It is unfortunate that on the Republican side, less than 1/10 are women. And so as a result, I think as elections go on and there are more women in elected office, both in the House and the Senate, there will be a difference. Women will make the difference.
Thank you, Susan. Phil Bell, your parting shot.
In a little bit of a similar vein, Congress this week lost a very effective and great legislator in Trent Franks of Arizona. Congressman Franks has done a great job over the years and was an ardent advocate for religious liberty. I'm sad to see him go, and even more sad to see under such difficult and I'd even say ridiculous circumstances, but I thank him for all of his service and look forward to his next act.
Thank you, Phil. Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
Well, I want to come back to our council president, Hans Riemer. We have a $120 million shortfall we found out this week. He was elected president of the council, so how did he celebrate it? He went and got arrested in D.C., grandstanding on an issue of which, frankly, there's bipartisan agreement that we ought to work out something on DACA, but he went down and got arrested. This is what's wrong with the council. This is what's wrong with him as a leader. Too much grandstanding, not enough work at the hard work of government.
Thank you, Mark. Rich Parsons, your parting shot.
Well, I'm going to close getting back to one of the issues Susan raised with the election of Roy Moore. We're hoping, I think, a lot of us who care about things like not putting child molesters in the state Senate or the U.S. Senate, we're hoping that the people of Alabama will stand up for some of the moral standards they say they stand for and make a judgment above partisanship that we care about character and leadership, not just the R or the D after someone's name. At some point, we have to come together as Americans and recognize that true leaders and good people of moral principle are more important than partisan labels. I'm hoping the people of Alabama will make that choice this week.
Thank you, Rich. You know, oftentimes when we talk about good government, as a panel, we talk about the old days and how governing was a much easier and cleaner process as we remember it. This is the weirdest year I have ever seen. We have 2 weeks left in the year, but this is the weirdest political year I have ever seen in my 65 years being involved in politics. I'm astonished that the Congress of the United States can't and has not gotten its act together to work together. Now, I mean, you can say that, you know, they can throw their stones at the Democratic Party and say that under President Obama and the leadership of Nancy Pelosi, they acted badly towards Republicans. Well, that doesn't mean the Republicans should be doing the same thing. I think that there needs to be new leadership in the Republican Party, and I'm hoping to see 2 new leaders next year after we go into 2018. Thank the panel for being here tonight. Thank you, the audience, for staying tuned each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.